I would love for you to just tell us more a little bit about what you guys do, because I was fascinated. I've never heard of the product before until we were researching. And full disclosure, I think you guys were great in the first phone call by explaining the price tag that for smaller firms it's harder to afford. So today we run an affinity with the hopes of eventually having another conversation and checking the product out. Also because if they have someone like you there for a decade plus, I'm very interested in learning what you guys are building.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. Thank you. So the way that we kind of phrase it, and it's definitely a case of like, it's been a big vision for some time, and in many cases along the way, it was like, how do we tell people that? My mom thinks we fix printers or something. We work with computers, and so the best way to describe it is, I think, like, we want to truly kind of transform the way the technology is sort of the role that it's playing in this market and across the board, like with LPs, with GPs, with intermediaries, and then with portfolio companies and underlying assets. And what the opportunity we see is that sort of, this market, not just venture, but, buyout and other sort of, segments of kind of alternative assets are disproportionately responsible for all sorts of, kind of innovation, certainly, but as well, the returns that we all are sort of, beneficiaries of.
There's more. I'll give you even an NVCA talking point. 2/3 of Americans that have healthcare actually have it through a company that raised venture capital in its history.
Yeah, totally. I love those because when we would write, thought pieces of Greenspring, they're punchy. I mean, like all those statistics, you're like, holy shit. Can that be like, is that a typo? And no, that's actually the point. So thank you for that. But yeah, I mean, so we see an opportunity for that to be even more efficient, right? And so whether it's like, applications and software that is helping you be more efficient internally, or whether it's, software that is helping you, like we're talking about here, like actually, open up and enable opportunities that you otherwise wouldn't have with the people somewhere in that ecosystem, right? Whether it's, a capital source or whether it's finding an asset, that's really what we're doing. And so it takes the form of, kind of traditional categorical, things like CRM and portal and, stuff like that. But we're really focused on, a big vision of kind of just changing how technology works. So in many ways, the conversation we've just been having, and so the path that took me here was, so it goes back to about 2008 or so. I was still at Greenspring, and really early on in my time there, when I first went to work there, they were using Salesforce.com, and they'd worked with a consultant prior to me going to work there, and they were like, "You're like the newest, most junior guy. Like, here, like, figure this out." And I was like, what? I have no idea what I'm doing. So I ended up kind of managing this thing. And then it was very clear to me very early on that, like, this thing was powerful in 2008, Salesforce.com. There were a lot of people, in venture and GPs that were using it, but it was like, it just was kind of like not really, getting there. And so I was introduced to Altvia's founder, Kevin Kelly, who had just prior to this been spending time at RCP Advisors, the lower middle market buyout fund of funds in Chicago. And so he was sort of playing like an outsourced CTO role there, and much more explicit in, like, choosing systems for them and stuff like that. And he had ended up with Salesforce, very quickly said, hey, like, there's a much bigger opportunity here. And so the opportunity was to actually sort of take the power of Salesforce as a technology platform, but not have to go through that sort of consultant model, and instead go through an application layer that, like, was punchy and market driven, that worked in this market. And so when I was introduced to him, I was like, ooh, this is what I've been looking for.